Hi guys, welcome back to the Elite FTS compound. I'm Tom Sheppard, and this is our third video in the body proportion series. Now we've got a very unfortunate raffle winner, Caleb here, who's not here under duress, I assure you. He wants us to have a look at his bench press and also what he can do to improve it based on his body proportion. So with our measurements with Caleb has come out as having long arms. So if you just put your wingspan out for us, Caleb, despite having very short upper arms, Caleb's wingspan is 2 inches bigger than his height, which means that he has proportionally long arms. So what we're going to see in someone that has long arms, for start with their pressing movements, they're going to be naturally very pec dominant, as we can kind of see from his pec development here anyway. That's the only compliment you're going to get, don't worry. But what we have with long armed lifters is that they are going to be pulling dominant. So when you have long arms, the muscles that we use to pull towards us, lats, rhomboids, traps, etc., they have favorable levers to work on. When you have a long arm, it is in your interest and it is easier to pull a weight towards the body. However, that is then harder to press a weight from the body. So just like a short leg lifter is going to be like squat dominant and a long legged lifter is going to be deadlift dominant, a long armed lifter like Caleb is going to be strong in pulling movements and weaker proportionally than in pressing movements. So in his training, he's going to need to actually do less pulling work than pressing work. So just like a long-legged lifter needs to do like 50 to 100% more quad work than they do posterior chain work, for Caleb, we probably need him doing probably 50 to 100% more pressing work than we do pulling work. Okay? So he's going to need to work harder on his bench press and his overhead press than he is going to need to work on his bent over rows and things like that. Now, within the pulling work that he does do, Caleb, if you don't mind just turning around for us, when we get a long-armed lifter, the lats have the most favorable leverages of all. So as we can see from Caleb, okay, this is a compliment, you gotta ignore it because it means I don't like you, it's fine. His lat development is pretty damn good here. So that's just very natural for someone when you see a long-armed lifter. The lat gets the most favorable leverages of all the pulling muscles. So within the pulling work that Caleb does, less of it needs to be lat dominant, and most of it, like 2/3 to 3/4, needs to be upper back dominant. So it's just things like traps, rhomboids, and rear delt work, okay? So things like rear delt raises, pendlay rows, and things like that. You're not gonna need to do a lot of lat pull downs, straight arm pull downs, and that type of thing. To be honest, most of the time doing your deadlifting work and your bench press properly and using your lats there is probably gonna be almost enough stimulation for you, okay? Now, because Caleb is long-armed, he's going to be pec dominant, as we said. The first thing that we need to address is the fact that because he's going to be going through a longer range of motion in his horizontal pressing work, he's going to be at a greater risk of pec tear. So just like me, I've got a long wingspan, I've got about 5 holes in my pecs to attest for this. You're going to be more at risk for things like pec tears, okay? So the first thing that we're going to go through here is a loaded stretch, which is basically just a very effective way of stretching out the pecs under load that have other benefits such as hypertrophy and type of things, okay? So I want you to grab that pair of dumbbells. Now, when we do this for real, Caleb would do this for a total time of 2 to 3 minutes. Now, he may have to rest within those 2 to 3 minutes, but we wouldn't want him getting any less than a minute at a time. If he's getting less than a minute at a time without a rest, we've loaded it too heavy. Okay, so what Caleb's going to do is set up like he would for a dumbbell press. Okay. So just take your time, do what you do normally. Right. And what you're going to do is go down to the bottom position and hold there, but not just hold. What we're aiming to do is pull further throughout the stretch. So we go down to what we believe is the bottom position, and then what I want you to do is actually use your lats and your upper back to try and pull the dumbbells down even lower. Okay. And what we're going to do then is we're going to get a stretch through the pec fibers at the bottom, but because they're under load, then what's also going to happen is we're essentially going to get a partial blood flow restriction, so you're also going to get a lot of lactic acid buildup. But basically the reason this works so well compared to a regular stretch is we're teaching the body and primarily the nervous system that it's okay to be under load in this position, and it will allow the fibers to lengthen more than if we were just doing like a traditional doorway stretch or something like that, okay? So I want you to lay back and set up your upper back the same you would as if you were doing like a heavy dumbbell press. So start at the top, and now all I want you to do is just have your hands a bit more neutral angled in, like so. Pull down to the bottom, and then from this position now, he's gonna pull them down hard as he can, there. So this should be an active position. So what I mean by that is, if you relaxed right now, those dumbbells would want to pop up a little bit, right? So the whole time he's keeping the shoulders tucked and he's pulling down through his lats to get a greater stretch through here and then get that occlusion effect, which is also going to build up the lactic acid there. And what he would do this for a cumulative time of 2 to 3 minutes, ideally at the beginning of his workout. And like I said, you may have to rest, pause, and take a break after 30 to 60 seconds, but you want to get at least 1 minute. That's it, just get out of that.
Yeah, sure.
If in that initial first round, if you like, you're not getting at least 1 minute of tension, then the weight is too heavy, okay? But your goal is to get to that 2 to 3 minute mark with cumulative time, okay? Another way you can do it, if you're strong enough, is to do it with dips as well. So go into the bottom of a dip position and actively pull and stretch there. That's obviously a bit harder because that's going to be your whole body weight, but that also works really well, okay? So we're done with those. So we just go over to the bench now so we can start doing some work there. So Caleb, being pec dominant in his bench press, he's going to be very strong in the kind of bottom half range, providing his back strength is strong enough to give him stability there. So he said that when he's missed, which doesn't happen often, which is good, he's missing in the transition period. So what we get is we get about halfway up on the bench press, which is primarily pec driven, then the loading starts to shift over to the front delts and the triceps. So that's where he's missing, is in that transition period. He's actually keeping it over his chest for too long because he's trying to keep the weight away from the front delts and triceps because they're proportionally weak. So we're just going to have you do a couple of normal reps on the bench just so we can go from that, okay? So just do your normal setup and just do like 5 or 6 normal reps for us, okay? Now Caleb's quite lucky in that he's got a big rib cage, so even though he's got long arms, his range of motion isn't too bad because he's got that big rib cage to aim for, which is going to shorten the range of motion. But he's still going to be more pec dominant out of the bottom. It just means that he's going to be proportionally a bit stronger when you're in there. Okay, so let's just have a look. Keep the heels pressed down. Okay, finish here. That's it. Back here every time. So curve it back. There you go. Perfect. Okay, and in. Well done. So, if we're doing pressing variations for Caleb, what we need to do is change the variation that we're doing to target either his front delts or his triceps more. Triceps is an easy one, so let's just go for a close grip to work that. So basically what's going to happen when we do the close grip is we're also going to get a bit more front delt recruitment. The reason being, when we go narrow grip and the elbows are in closer to the side, this essentially becomes longer relative to the body because it's not as flared out. So when you get a lower touch point, you also get more loading on the front delt because it has to curve back more, right? So if we touch up here, we have less curve than if we touch down here. So a close grip, even though it's primarily targeted as a tricep exercise because you get more elbow bend at the bottom, we also get a bit more front delt loading then because we have to curve that bar back and extend the shoulder back here, which also then is primarily the front delt. Okay, so what I want you to do, we don't need to change it a huge amount. I just want you to come in like half a hand width each side. Okay, and then but use the same type of grip and setup that you were doing. Okay, let's have a look at that. Okay, so now you're going to have to tuck more. And see how now the bar is coming down lower down his torso because he's tucking in more. So that means A, he's getting more elbow bend, so he's getting a bit more tricep loading. But because we've now got more horizontal distance to cover this way, he's also going to be getting more front delt loading because that's the primary muscle that's helping to drive the bar back over the shoulders in the lift, okay? We can even come in a bit more than that. Let's go. If you can come in, so your pinky finger is like inside the ring, just a touch. That's it, knuckles up, and now twist through here. So the touch point's going to be just a little bit lower again, okay? Just a little bit. That's it, keep tucking in, and flare on the way up. Good, rack it, okay. Good, have a rest just a minute, okay? So that would be good, just a general hypertrophy off-season variation for you to build up. If you want to bench press, that's going to build up the muscles that are naturally going to lag a bit better compared to your comp grip. Okay. Now, if you want to do something a bit more specific, where you're missing is the transition point. So it might not even be that your front delts and triceps are weak. It's that in terms of your nervous system, you're not good at transitioning the load from primarily the pecs to the front delts, and that's where you're kind of going wrong. So what would be good for you to do would either be to do like pin work from that position, or even better, if you're in off season and the weights are lighter, we can do like pause work at that transition point. So that's what I want you to do now. I want you to go down, and we do a pause on the way up, which is harder than using a pause on the way down. And that's another way you could kind of periodize it, if you like. If you want to start using heavier weights, start with a pause on the way up at the very beginning of the off season, and then do the pause on the way down, because then you'll be moving more load. Okay. Yeah. I want you to pause just before that miss point. Okay. Because if you miss here, this isn't where you fucked up. You fucked up here, but the bar has some momentum, so you carried on, and then you stalled. Very rarely where the bar actually stops in space is where you went wrong, unless it was moving incredibly slow throughout the whole lift. It's usually just a touch before, because that momentum lets it carry through for a little bit longer. So wherever you missed, I want you to come down and pause 2-3 seconds there, and then focus on initiating the lift through your front delts and triceps to get it back over your shoulders. So I want you to also go back to your comp grip for this, okay? Okay. So everything's the same on the way down, and now on the way up, pause just lower there, and now drive through the front delts and triceps. So focus on staying real strong here, and then up. Good. So we want to build stability and force production in this range here. So make it as hard as possible for yourself. Contract everything as hard as you can in that pause. That's it. Just do one more if you can. Good. And in. Hold on. Nice. Have a rest. So the other thing that would be really good for you would be incline work, because basically if you want to build up your front delts, you can do overhead press variations, that's fine, but you get just as much front delt recruitment in an incline press 15 to 30 degrees as you do in an overhead press, but you're going to be moving way more load on an incline press. So if the recruitment is the same but the load is higher, it's a better stimulus. Okay, so instead of fixing that problem with, not that overhead press is a bad movement to do, but specific to that weak point, incline press 15 or 30 degrees is going to have a better carryover for you because of the greater load that you can use on it, okay? Also, where you're missing though, where you're pausing, is basically like probably a 3 board. So what I would say then, as you're getting closer to your comp, if you're still missing there, then you could be doing 3 board work as like a primary strength movement. So should we give that a go now?
Yeah,
you want to do that? So we got it. Yeah, actually, here's one conveniently placed earlier.
How about that?
Okay, so I want you to go down, but the goal for you is going to be, you know, when you see a lot of people do board work, they'll sink it in a lot, right, and that's fine. You know, if that's, it depends what they're trying to get out of the movement, right? But for you, if it is like a neuromuscular thing in terms of you don't know how to create stability and force production in that point, we don't really want to be relaxing there, because that's not the position we're going to be in when we do the full lift, right? We're going to be tense and the bar is going to be moving. Yep. So what I want you to do is come down and imagine that you can only put like half the weight of the bar on the board, okay, so that everything stays exactly where it should be. And then you're teaching yourself to go from a stop, say like you've got a heavy lift and you're about to stall. It's teaching you how to create force and get that bar moving again from that slow speed or no speed, yep, in this case, okay? Okay. So when you feel ready, go ahead. Yep. After you've unwrapped the bar, I'll put the board on your chest, okay? Okay. So half the weight onto the board, and then front delts and triceps off the board. Good, and rack it, okay? Now, that is going to carry over better than sinking it in, for example. The other thing that you could do is do pin presses from that height. That would be more of an overload because it's more stable, and you you get to fiddle around with the bar on the pin at the beginning of every rep and then drive from the correct position every time. The only downside to pin work is that sometimes it will beat up your elbows, but that's usually because people lower it too fast. As in, they come down, they basically treat it with no eccentric, and then they slam down on the pins, and that rapid unloading is what causes the tendonitis that a lot of people get from it. So the pin work you could overload more, so it would be better closer to your comp, but you need to make sure that you do the eccentric properly if you're going to do that, because otherwise it will end up beating you up, okay? So then outside of that, it's just going to be basic hypertrophy stuff in the off season for the front delts and triceps. You're going to need to do like little to no direct pec work because it's already your strength. So don't waste training volume on what's already your strength. What you want to be focusing on pressing wise is front delts and triceps. Now, like we said, related to your back work, you probably don't need to do as much as the average person, but most of your pulling work is going to need to be rear delt, trap and rhomboid dominant. So basically most pulling movements where you're in a more flared position or pulling something higher up the torso as opposed to down, or just horizontal pulls in nature. Okay. Hope you guys found that useful. Until next time.